Okay, so let's unpack this. For centuries, the way we thought about the universe, the very fabric of existence, it was really heavily influenced by a certain kind of
Right,
science.
a very specific picture of reality.
Exactly. Imagine a huge, intricate clockwork machine. Perfectly predictable, right? Every gear, every lever moving in a way you could, well, determine beforehand.
The Newtonian model, basically.
Yeah,
Deterministic.
that's it. The classical Newtonian view of the cosmos. Think about it. Every atom, just like a tiny billiard ball, following these really clear rules. Every event was just a direct result of whatever happened right before it.
Cause and effect, perfectly linear.
Yeah, and it was a universe where everything felt very separate, distinct objects, clear boundaries, everything ultimately predictable if you just had enough information.
A very ordered, mechanical view.
And this mechanical worldview, it was dominant in the West for such a long time. And it wasn't just physics, was it? It actually gave people a powerful way to think about, well, theological ideas too.
Absolutely. It
Yeah.
sort of underpinned a certain concept of God.
It suggested this idea of a transcendent divine watchmaker, like a god who built this amazing cosmic clock, wound it up, set it going,
And maybe stepped back.
kind of, yeah, stood apart from it, observing its grand, deterministic dance. This god was outside creation, looking down from somewhere else.
Above it all.
Right. And it offered a kind of comfort, I suppose, a sense of order, a universe with a mastermind looking after it all, but from a distance.
A very specific relationship between the creator and the creation.
But then the 20th century rolls around
Yeah.
and physics just goes through these, seismic shifts. Suddenly the universe wasn't quite the neat, predictable machine we thought it was.
Not at all, especially at the small scales.
Yeah, the certainties just started to crumble, replaced by this really strange, often totally counterintuitive reality when you look at the tiny stuff.
The quantum world.
Exactly.
Sure.
And that's really our mission for this deep dive. We want to explore how one of the most, well, baffling and profound quantum concepts, quantum entanglement, isn't just shaking up science, but it's also profoundly reshaping our biggest ideas. Concepts of God, spirituality, connection itself.
It really forces us to rethink things.
So get ready for a journey into some really surprising facts, maybe some aha moments. We're going to try and make these complex ideas as clear and relatable as possible for you, the listener. You don't need a PhD in physics for this one.
Definitely not. We'll break it down.
We're going deep into how this quantum weirdness challenges our very ideas of connection and maybe even divinity.
Yeah, what's fascinating here is how fundamentally 20th century physics, especially quantum theory, just completely shattered that old mechanistic worldview.
Shattered is a good word.
It really is. It wasn't just like, oh, we need to tweak the clockwork model a bit, maybe oil a gear here or there.
All right, not just minor adjustment.
No, this was a complete root and branch reevaluation of reality at its most fundamental level, down where things get really small.
So the old assumptions just didn't work anymore.
They just didn't hold up. The idea that everything was separate, that cause and effect was this simple A then B chain. Quantum mechanics showed that wasn't the full picture, not even close.
So the clock wasn't made of gears after all.
Yeah, maybe more like mist and possibilities, like you said earlier. It's a radical shift.
And entanglement is right at the heart of the shift.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Among all the strange ideas in quantum theory, entanglement is arguably one of the most baffling and maybe the most profound. It's the idea that was so weird, even Einstein couldn't quite accept it. He famously called it
Spooky action at a distance. Yeah, I've heard that phrase.
exactly. And it's spooky because it directly challenges our most basic, gut-level intuitions about how the world works.
Like what specifically?
Well, first, separation. The idea that things are distinct, independent entities. Entanglement says, maybe not always.
Okay.
And then locality. That's the idea that something can only affect its immediate surroundings, or that influences have to travel through space, at a finite speed, like light.
Right. Action requires proximity or travel time.
Entanglement seems to bypass that.
Mm-hmm.
And it also really shakes up our understanding of causality, that neat, linear cause and effect chain.
So it throws all these fundamental ideas into question.
Pretty much. Separation, locality, causality, big ones. And because it does that, it's provided this incredibly fertile ground for, well, new ways of thinking about spirituality.
Ah, okay. So that's the link.
Yeah, frameworks that inspire concepts of God or the divine that are much more immanent, meaning present within the universe, not just outside it and deeply interconnected. It's a huge departure from that traditional watchmaker God.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting and maybe a little bit mind-bending for some of us. What exactly is quantum entanglement? Can we break that down simply?
Let's try. So fundamentally, it's a phenomenon in quantum mechanics where two or more particles, tiny things like electrons or photons,
Right.
become linked.
Linked how?
Linked in such a way that they essentially share the same fate or the same description. Even if they become separated by vast distances, their properties remain connected.
So their fates are intertwined no matter how far apart they get.
Exactly. And this is the crucial part, Phil. The linkage exists regardless of the distance separating them. Across the room, across the solar system, theoretically, across the universe.
Okay, wow. So give us an example.
Right, well, imagine you have two entangled particles, maybe created together in some process.
Right.
Let's say they have a property called spin, which can be up or down, sort of like a coin toss being heads or tails.
Okay.
If these particles are entangled, their spins will be correlated. For example, if you measure one particle and find its spin is up, you instantly know that the other particle's spin is down.
Instantly, even if it's light years away.
Instantly. That's the spooky part. There's no time delay. It's not like a signal travels from particle A to particle B saying, hey, I'm spin up, so you be spin down.
So how does it know?
That's the million-dollar question. Physics describes the correlation perfectly. The math works out. The experiments confirm it again and again. But how that instantaneous connection works is still debated. It's as if, in some fundamental way, they aren't truly separate.
Like an invisible thread connecting them.
That's a great analogy someone used, yeah. An invisible thread across space and time.
Yeah.
Or perhaps they're just two aspects of a single, larger reality that we can't easily perceive.
Okay, that's pretty profound. It really does challenge that idea of separate things.
Absolutely. It's precisely what baffled Einstein. It seems to violate what he called the principle of locality, that influences can't travel faster than light. But entanglement doesn't seem to involve travel in the normal sense. The connection just is.
Fundamental and immediate.
Exactly. It hints at a deeper, more unified reality underneath the surface of things.
So if we connect this back to the bigger picture, you're saying this non-local connection, this instantaneous link, it completely undermines that classical idea, the idea that reality is just made up of isolated, separate parts.
Fundamentally, yes. For centuries, we operated under the assumption that the universe is like, I don't know, a giant box of Lego bricks.
Right, you can take them apart, look at them individually.
Exactly. Analyze them, rearrange them. A star is separate from a planet. A tree is separate from a rock. They interact, sure, through forces like gravity, but they are fundamentally distinct objects.
That seems pretty intuitive, actually.
It does, based on our everyday experience. But entanglement suggests that at the very deepest level, the quantum level, this might not be the whole story. It suggests the universe isn't just a collection of separate bits and pieces, even if they look separate to us macroscopically.
So what does it suggest instead, if not separate parts?
Well, the profound shift here is that the universe is not just a collection of isolated objects. Instead, what entanglement strongly suggests is that at a foundational level, the universe is more like an indivisible, holistic web of relationships.
A web, okay.
Yeah, think of a vast, intricately woven tapestry rather than just a pile of separate threads. If you pull on one thread in a tapestry, you see how it's connected to and affects the entire pattern.
So everything is intrinsically linked.
That's the implication, not necessarily by physical ropes or wires, but through some underlying unity, some fundamental interconnectedness that's built into the fabric of reality itself.
Wow. Okay, just pause there for a second. If everything were subtly connected like that, particles, stars, us, how does that change things? How does that change how you see the world or your place in it? It kind of dissolves the boundaries, doesn't it?
It really does. It challenges that core idea of a completely separate self that many of us operate with. It suggests we're deeply interwoven with everything else.
Okay, so if the universe is fundamentally this indivisible whole, this web, as entanglement suggests, then what does that mean for how we think about divinity, about God?
Yeah, this is where it gets really interesting philosophically and theologically.
If everything's woven together, that idea of an indivisible whole, well, it starts to sound like a pretty powerful metaphor for God, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. The traditional image we talked about, that separate external God, the divine watchmaker looking down.
Yeah, outside the system.
Entanglement challenges that profoundly. It opens the door to seeing the divine not as something external to creation, an entity totally apart from the universe.
But as something within it.
Exactly. Something woven into its very fabric, inseparable from it. The interconnectedness itself could be seen as a reflection of the divine nature.
Okay, so this leads to different theological ideas.
Precisely. This is where we see concepts that resonate much more strongly with this quantum picture. Ideas like pantheism, for example.
Pantheism.
Yeah,
Remind us what that is.
sure. Pantheism is the belief that God is the universe.
Yeah.
Not just the creator of the universe, but the universe itself in its entirety. All of reality is divine.
Okay. God is everything.
Right. And then there's a related, slightly more nuanced view called panentheism.
Panentheism.
Yes.
Yeah.
Panentheism suggests that God is in the universe, permeating every part of it, like pantheism,
Yeah.
but also transcends it, meaning God is more than just the physical universe. The universe is in God, but God is greater than the universe alone.
So God is both within everything and also beyond everything.
Kind of, yeah. Think of it like maybe your mind contains your thoughts, but your mind is also more than just the sum of those thoughts. The universe is within God, but God's being isn't limited only to the universe.
I see. That's a subtle but important difference.
It is. And both of these views, especially panentheism, align quite beautifully with the implications of entanglement.
How so?
Well, in this kind of spiritual framework, God isn't some distant monarch ruling over creation, issuing decrees from afar.
Right, not the king on the throne.
Instead, God is often described as the very fabric of existence, that interconnected web we were talking about. That is the divine presence.
So the pattern of entanglement itself.
Could be seen as the signature of the divine, yes. Connecting every particle, every star, every living being, every consciousness. The divine isn't out there somewhere you have to read.
It's in here. It's the connection between things.
Exactly. It's the immanent underlying unity of all that is. The silent, constant hum of connection that permeates everything. It's the invisible infrastructure that makes everything, ultimately, one.
So seeking the divine isn't about looking up, but looking deeper into the connections.
That's a great way to put it, looking into the interconnectedness of all things, including ourselves.
Yeah.
Because we're part of that fabric too.
You know, what's really striking about this is how this very modern scientific concept, entanglement, born from studying tiny particles, how it seems to echo some really ancient spiritual ideas.
It absolutely does. There are remarkable resonances.
These wisdom traditions, particularly from the East, they were talking about fundamental unity and interconnectedness for millennia, long before quantum physics was even a glimmer.
That's right. Without the mathematical formalism, of course, but the core intuition was there.
Well, take the concept of Brahman in Hinduism. Isn't that described as the ultimate reality, the universal spirit?
Yes, exactly. Brahman is seen as the source of everything, the unchanging reality that pervades all existence, the essence within all things. It's an all-encompassing unity.
Or the Tao in Taoism. The way.
The Tao, yes. The fundamental, often described as unnameable, principle that underlies everything. It's the source, the pattern, the very flow and substance of the cosmos. Again, a concept pointing towards a deep underlying unity and interconnectedness.
So these ancient traditions, they intuitively grasped this idea that the divine wasn't separate, but within and as the universe itself.
They did. They had profound insights into the interconnected nature of reality. And what's powerful about entanglement in this context is that it provides a modern scientific language through which to explore these age-old intuitions.
So it's not proving the ancient wisdom.
No, science doesn't really prove spiritual concepts in that way, but it offers a new lens, a new framework. It gives us a scientifically resonant way to understand and articulate these deep, intuitive feelings about interconnectedness.
So it kind of builds a bridge between ancient wisdom and modern science.
I think that's a really good way to look at it. It allows for a dialogue that maybe wasn't possible before.
Okay, let's go back to that spooky part. This instantaneous correlation between entangled particles. It really does pose a mind-bending question, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
How does one particle know the state of its partner across potentially vast distances? Instantly. You said there's no signal traveling between them in the normal sense.
Right. No classical information transfer that respects the speed of light limit.
So physics can observe that it happens, they can measure it.
Yes, it's a well-verified experimental fact. The correlations are real and predicted perfectly by quantum mechanics.
But physics doesn't offer consciousness as the explanation for how it happens.
No, not directly within the standard scientific framework. Physics describes the mathematical correlations very precisely. The how or why in terms of a deeper mechanism, especially involving consciousness, moves more into the realm of interpretation and philosophy.
But it certainly opens up fascinating questions for people thinking beyond just the equations.
Definitely. And this is where, again, spiritual thinkers and some philosophers have drawn a really powerful analogy, even if it's metaphorical.
What's the analogy?
They look at this non-local connection, this apparent instantaneous knowing between particles, and they suggest it's reminiscent of or suggestive of something like a universal field of information or consciousness that permeates the cosmos.
Okay, a universal field of consciousness. That's a big idea.
It is, and it's crucial to stress this isn't a direct scientific claim that entanglement is consciousness acting. It's using entanglement as a way to help conceptualize a universe that might be far more integrated, maybe even aware, than the old clockwork model allowed.
So in this view, God isn't like a person with a mind thinking thoughts like we do.
Not an anthropomorphic being with human-like psychology, no. In this kind of thinking, God might be understood as the universal conscious field itself.
So God is the consciousness of the universe.
Or the substrate of consciousness, yes. It's not about God having thoughts, but maybe God being the thinking, the awareness, the conscious ground of being from which everything arises.
The universe itself is thinking, or conscious.
In a sense, perhaps. Maybe aware is a better word. A living aware system at its most fundamental level, constantly processing information, constantly expressing itself through the unfolding of reality. It's a very provocative thought.
And where do we fit in? Our individual consciousness.
Well, in this picture, your mind, my mind, our individual awareness. It's not an isolated phenomenon. It's more like a localized eddy or a whirlpool in this vast cosmic ocean of awareness.
Like a ripple on a lake.
Exactly. Temporarily individualized, yes, we have our unique perspectives and experiences, but ultimately we're inseparable from the whole ocean. We arise from it and we return to it.
So that changes how you think about spirituality too, doesn't it? It's not just asking an external God for help.
Right. It reframes it. It becomes less about petitioning a separate higher being and maybe more about an act of aligning one's own awareness with this greater universal consciousness.
Tuning in,
recognizing that connection, realizing that our own awareness is already a localized expression of that grander universal awareness. It's about realizing our participation in the cosmic mind.
Okay, there's another related quantum idea that often comes up in these discussions, the observer effect. That seems equally fascinating and maybe just as weird.
It is, and it's closely linked conceptually to entanglement in some ways, dealing with the nature of quantum reality itself.
Can you simplify that one for us too, the observer effect?
Sure. So quantum theory suggests that before a tiny particle like an electron is measured or observed, it doesn't actually exist in a single definite state or location.
It doesn't, so where is it?
It's kind of everywhere it could be, all at once. It exists as a field of potentialities, a range of possibilities, often described mathematically as a wave function. It's like a blur of potential states.
A cloud of possibilities.
But here's the kicker, the really crucial mind-bending part. The moment you observe it, the moment you measure it or interact with it using an instrument, it seems to collapse into a definite state. It snaps out of that blur of possibilities and becomes a concrete particle with a specific property, like being right here or having spin up.
So the act of looking at it changes it or solidifies it.
That's the interpretation that has sparked so much discussion. The interaction involved in measurement seems to force the particle to choose one reality from all the possibilities.
Wow. That suggests that observation isn't passive at all in the quantum world.
Not necessarily, no. It suggests that the act of measurement, and perhaps by extension consciousness itself, might play an active role in shaping what we perceive as physical reality.
So reality isn't just out there fixed, waiting for us to find it.
At the quantum level, it seems reality is more participatory. It's somehow brought into definite being through interaction and observation.
Okay, that's a huge implication. How have spiritual thinkers run with that idea?
Well, this is where some have interpreted the observer effect to mean that consciousness is not just a passive spectator watching the cosmic show unfold, but is actually an active co-creator of reality.
Co-creator, that's a powerful word.
It is. It represents a truly radical shift from that older view, the watchmaker model, where humans were often seen as, just humble subjects of a fixed divine plan.
Playing out a pre-written script.
Exactly. Just following orders, obeying the grand design laid out by the external creator.
But if consciousness plays a role in collapsing the wave function, in making reality concrete,
Then instead, we become active participants in the ongoing creation of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
Our awareness, our focus, our intention might actually be part of the mechanism by which potential reality becomes actual reality.
So our inner world, thoughts, intentions might actually influence the outer world.
That's the empowering and somewhat daunting implication some draw from it. It suggests our choices, our focus, our consciousness are far more consequential than we might have assumed in a purely mechanical universe.
We're not just recipients, we're collaborators.
Collaborators in the cosmic unfolding. That's a beautiful way to phrase it. Imagine the sense of weight, but also the potential liberation that comes with seeing ourselves that way.
So taking that perspective, what does it mean for something really common like prayer? How does that get reinterpreted?
That's a great question. Because the traditional view of prayer often is a request aimed outward, right?
Yeah, you're asking an external God to intervene, to change things for you.
Please make X happen, please heal Y. It's a petition to a separate power.
But if reality is participatory,
Then prayer doesn't have to be solely that petition. It can also be understood, perhaps more profoundly, as an act of focused intention.
focused intention.
Yeah, like a conscious participation in that collapsing of the wave function.
Yeah.
You're not just asking for a reality. You're actively using your focused consciousness, your will, your energy to help manifest a desired reality from the field of potential.
So it's less like asking for a gift and more like
Yeah.
helping to build it.
Helping to co-create it, yes. Aligning your inner state with a potential outcome, intending it into being. It shifts prayer from primarily being about petition to being about participation, actively weaving your intentions into the fabric of reality.
That feels very different, more active.
It really fosters a profound sense of empowerment, but also responsibility, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely responsibility too.
Because if our consciousness is seen this way as a vital and integral part of the divine's creative process, then we're not just passive parts of creation.
We're active agents within it.
Exactly, helping to shape what emerges from the infinite potential of the cosmos. That's a powerful concept for you, the listener, to consider. It suggests your inner state, your focused thought, your deepest intentions truly matter, that you have agency.
You're not just a product of the universe, but a co-creator within it.
A mini-creator, perhaps, participating in the divine dance of creation.
Okay, let's shift slightly. You mentioned entanglement helps us rethink the nature of divinity. What about those classic divine attributes like omnipresence or omniscience? Does entanglement offer a new way to think about those too?
It really does. It offers a lens that can make those concepts feel perhaps less abstract or paradoxical. Take omnipresence, God being everywhere at once.
Right. Traditionally, I always imagine that as like a literal physical presence everywhere, like an invisible being filling all space, which is hard to grasp.
It is hard to grasp, especially if you think of God as a distinct entity. It seems physically impossible.
So how does the entanglement model help?
It suggests a more, I think, elegant understanding. Divine omnipresence might not be about God having a specific physical location in every single spot simultaneously. Instead, it's about fundamental interconnectedness.
Back to the web.
Exactly. God is present everywhere, not by being physically in every coordinate of space, but because the entire universe is a non-local system. Every point is, in that deep quantum sense, instantaneously and fundamentally connected to every other point through this web of entanglement.
So God's presence isn't about location, it's about the connection itself.
Precisely. It's not about being physically there, but about being relationally everywhere. The divine essence is the very fabric of connection, the underlying unity that means no part of the universe is truly isolated. It's a presence inherent in the nature of reality itself.
Okay, that makes more intuitive sense than the invisible giant idea. What about omniscience then? God knowing everything.
Similar shift in perspective. The traditional view often pictures omniscience as, well, the mind of a supreme being containing an infinite database, like a cosmic supercomputer that knows every fact, past, present, and future.
All the data stored somewhere.
Right. But again, through the lens of entanglement and interconnectedness, omniscience can be beautifully redefined.
Yeah.
It's perhaps not a single mind possessing infinite data, but rather omniscience is the total information inherent within the entangled holistic system of the universe itself.
The universe's own information.
Exactly. Think of the universe as one vast, interconnected, maybe even living system. Its knowledge isn't stored in one place. It is the sum total of all its states, all its relationships, all its connections, the entire pattern across all space and time.
So God's knowledge is the universe's knowledge of itself.
That's the idea, an awareness that emerges from the interconnected system rather than being imposed on it by some external mind. It's a knowing that is the very being and becoming of the cosmos.
Wow. Okay, that reframes those attributes in a really profound way. Makes them feel less supernatural and more natural in a deep sense.
More integrated into the fabric of reality as we're coming to understand it through physics, perhaps.
But this feels like a really important but. We need to be careful here.
Yeah, absolutely crucial. This raises a really important point, and we have to maintain a very clear distinction.
What's the distinction?
Quantum entanglement is a scientific theory. It's been rigorously tested, it's described by precise mathematics, it's confirmed by countless experiments in labs around the world. It is not, however, a theology. It's not a spiritual doctrine in itself.
So physicists aren't saying entanglement proves God exists.
Definitely not. Physicists, quite rightly, are very cautious about making those kinds of metaphysical leaps. Entanglement, the observer effect. They don't scientifically prove the existence of God or a universal consciousness or a participatory cosmos in the way science proves things empirically.
It's not direct evidence for their spiritual claims?
No. It doesn't provide the kind of evidence science demands for such claims, like finding a new particle or observing a specific astronomical event predicted by a theory.
Okay, so if it doesn't prove these things, what is its power then? Why are these connections so compelling if they're not scientific proof?
That's the key question. Its power lies not in proof, but in its incredible capacity as a new and profound metaphor.
A metaphor. Explain that.
Well, a metaphor helps us understand one thing by relating it to something else, right? It bridges concepts. Entanglement, non-locality, the observer effect, these scientifically validated concepts provide a powerful new way of thinking about ancient spiritual ideas.
So it gives us a modern framework.
Exactly. A modern framework that allows for spiritual concepts that are more integrated, less dualistic.
Less separation between God and world, mind and matter.
Precisely. And more aligned with a holistic understanding of existence. For centuries, science and spirituality often felt like they were in completely separate boxes, sometimes even opposing ones.
Right, the science versus religion debate.
Quantum mechanics, with its inherent weirdness and interconnectedness, helps us bridge that gap conceptually. It helps us envision possibilities for how the divine might operate, how we might be connected, how reality might function, in ways that feel resonant with our deepest scientific understanding.
So it's a tool for imagination, for conceptualizing.
Yes. It's a powerful new language for talking about the ineffable, those deep mysteries, in a way that connects with the cutting edge of science. It gives us a new way to imagine the divine and our relationship to it, not just a new reason to believe.
Wow. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We started with that old classical clockwork universe.
Predictable, mechanical, separate parts.
And its distant watchmaker god. And we've journeyed into the quantum realm, this deeply interconnected, frankly mind-bending reality suggested by quantum physics.
A very different picture indeed.
And what we've really seen is how quantum entanglement, this spooky action at a distance, along with ideas like the observer effect, has just irrevocably altered the landscape. Not just the intellectual landscape of science, but the spiritual landscape, too.
It really has opened up new dialogues.
It seems to have played a big role in sort of dismantling that old paradigm, the separate reality, the detached God.
Challenging those assumptions.
And in its place, it's inspired these incredible new visions of an immanent divinity woven right into the fabric of everything.
God within.
A universal consciousness, maybe, that we're all part of, like those ripples in the ocean.
Interconnected awareness.
And even a participatory reality where our own consciousness isn't just watching, but is actively co-creating what happens.
From passive subject to active participant.
It's this huge shift, isn't it? From seeing the universe as just a collection of isolated things to seeing the cosmos as fundamentally a unified, maybe even living whole.
It's a profound perspective shift. And while, as we stressed, science and spirituality remain distinct ways of knowing with different methods and goals.
Right, the metaphor versus the proof.
Exactly. But those spooky connections deep inside quantum mechanics have undeniably opened up a really compelling dialogue. They're pushing us as thinkers, as seekers, as just curious human beings, to envision a cosmos and maybe a concept of the divine that is far more unified, far more mysterious, and far more entangled than we perhaps ever imagined before.
So maybe a final thought for our listeners to take away and ponder. How might your own understanding of connection to others, to nature, to the universe itself, How might your sense of participation in the world and maybe even your concept of the divine, how might all that change? Knowing that the universe, at its very deepest level, appears to be this intricately connected, fundamentally entangled web.
And knowing that you, your consciousness, your being, are an absolutely inextricable part of that living, evolving cosmic design.
Yeah, something to really sit with. We hope this deep dive has given you plenty to think about, plenty to ponder, and maybe offered a new lens or two for viewing your own place in this truly incredible cosmos.
Keep exploring those connections.
Absolutely. Keep questioning, keep connecting the dots, whether it's between science and spirituality or just between yourself and the world around you. There's always more to discover.
Always deeper to dive.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We encourage you to continue exploring these fascinating ideas on your own.